Welcome to The Writer's Dream. This is a show where writers can talk about how they write, how they publish, and how they market. Today's show is going to be a little bit different. First, let me tell you about where you can find us. You can find us on YouTube. Just look for my name, Linda Maria Frank. Click on my picture, and then click on the videos. There are over 100 interviews with local authors. Most of the authors that I have live here on Long Island. It's amazing how many authors there are. Been doing this for 12 years, and so we have a nice group of authors for you to tap into. If you're interested in reading and writing and you want to start to write, there's a lot of very, very good advice here. So today's show, we're also on Facebook, of course, The Writer's Dream. And we're also here at LTV. You can look for our videos here. So today I want to do something different. I'm going to tell my story. And the reason why I'm doing this is pretty much a training video because I interview many authors, and sometimes what happens is the elements of the interview that will make it a successful interview get lost in the sauce. We get off on a tangent. We start telling different stories or different experiences, and we don't ever get to the part about publishing and good advice and marketing and the kinds of things that authors need to know about. We don't end up trading important information. So let me tell you my story. Let me first tell you what the elements of a good interview are. Inspiration, we start with that. Plot, setting, and characters, okay? And then we move on to publishing, marketing, and advice, okay? So how do we do that? All right, let me tell you my story. My name is Linda Maria Frank. I have written the Annie Tillery Mystery Series, and I have written The Buccaneers of St. Frederick Island, which is #1 in a series because I'm going to be publishing the second book very soon, hopefully by Christmas. Okay, so in the 12 years that I have done this, I have learned an awful lot from authors, and I hope that they have learned from the show as well. So the first part of an author's journey is inspiration. So what inspired me to write? Well, I'll tell you a little story about how I decided to do some writing. I was a teacher for many years, and I had library duty. And library duty was wonderful because it was during lunch periods. Nobody came into the library, or hardly anybody came into the library. Actually, it's because our librarian really didn't want the kids in the library. That was very strange. But anyway, one day I was sitting there. It was winter. It was very nice and warm and cozy in the library. The snow was falling down. And I was working on a project that I had. I taught forensic science for years. And when I taught forensic science, what I did was I wrote little mystery stories, and my students had to research how you would solve these mystery stories. They had to pull out the clues from the story. They had to go to their textbook or any other source and find out how those clues would be processed. And then we would hold actually a court case, a case in front of a judge. I was the judge. The class was the jury, and the students had to be the prosecution lawyer, the defense lawyer. They had to bring in expert witnesses. They had to set up a crime scene. It was a load of fun. But I realized that some of these stories were very interesting to me. I particularly liked how forensic science is used to authenticate art pieces. And I wrote a nice little story about that, and I said, this could be a book. I loved Nancy Drew when I was a kid. I loved mystery stories. So that's how I got started writing. Now, what did I do with that? What I did with that was I took some courses because I didn't really know. What did I know about writing a book? I mean, you could read a book and you can copy what's going on there, but I thought it was a good idea for me to find out exactly how to do that. So I took 2 courses, and in taking the courses, I wrote the first 2 books. I wrote The Madonna Ghost, and I wrote Girl with Pencil Drawing. And the mentor I had said to me, these are pretty good. You could sell them. But she said, it took me about 7 years to sell my first book. And I thought, oh, 7 years. I couldn't wait 7 years. So I put them aside. And then in that time period, what happened was indie publishing became something better than Vanity Press. And I decided to publish them using indie press. Okay, all right. You need ideas. And one of the most common questions I get is, where do you get your ideas from? I've done workshops with kids. I have done talks in front of adults in libraries, and they say that's the most common question is, where do you get your ideas from? So I thought about it and I thought about it, and a lot of people will just tell you they fall from the air somewhere. I have a quote here from an author by the name of Frank Delaney, who wrote a book about Ireland, and he was a poet. And they asked him the same question, and this was his answer. He said, poets are like that with poems. No sooner do they listen out a poem, but it swoops down, whispers something to the top of their heads, and they feel it down to their brains, along their arms, into their fingers, and out onto the page in letters. Poems are like angels. They often visit you. They visit often, but you've to be watching out for them, and you're to believe in them to benefit from their gifts. Ireland has a great many poets because we've quite a country here with empty fields and silent lanes where it's very easy to hear poems when they come by. So in other words, you really have to listen. You have to listen to your brain and your ideas. But what I came up with was my explanation, and this was to kids, involved the obvious. Most authors read a lot. They do a fair amount of research. They observe people and situations. All of this is stored in the file cabinet of memory. But then what provokes the combination of memories to coalesce into an idea? This is what I said. When you write a book, you should write down all your ideas, your research, and pictures that might inspire you, and then all that stuff rattles around in your brain, and eventually something connects to make sense. So it's kind of, ideas are something that's very difficult to explain. It's difficult to explain how the human brain works. People have been working on that for years. Okay, so let me tell you about my books, because this is the next part of a good interview, is the author has to tell you about the book. So I wrote 4 in the series of Annie Tillery mysteries. Annie Tillery's my main character. The first one is the Madonna Ghost, and it takes place on Fire Island. The inspiration for that book was I was a volunteer at Fire Island Lighthouse, and there was a mural on the wall about a ship that had grounded on the sandbar. I mean, Fire Island's a sandbar, but then off that sandbar or other sandbars, and often in storms, ships would run aground on those sandbars. And there was this mural of this long table with coffee pots on it and volunteers giving coffee and food to the people who were getting off the boat that had been grounded because they weren't going anywhere. So they were, so I looked at that and I said, that's an interesting idea. And then I began to look into the history of Fire Island and how many shipwrecks there really were and how many people died. So my ghost comes from that. My ghost is actually a survivor, not a survivor. Well, she survives to get off the boat and makes it to shore, but then she dies, and she is looking for her child who is also dead. So that's my ghost. The other inspiration for that book was sailing. I used to have a sailboat, did quite a bit of sailing, and I wanted to capture what it was like to sail because I was never going to have a sailboat again. Since I worked with teenagers, I love the whole sweetness of that first time that you fall in love. And of course, there is the idea of how many different kinds of crime happen on Fire Island. So all those things came together, and out of that came the plot of the Madonna Ghost. Girl with Pencil Drawing, Annie takes a series of art lessons, and she actually comes across a theory of art forgers and art thieves. The inspiration for that book was because I loved the forensic science that is used to authenticate art pieces. It takes place in New York City and Brooklyn, and it's New York City in a snowstorm, which is nothing is as beautiful and as romantic as that. Also in Brooklyn, with the Brooklyn Bridge and the brownstones at Brooklyn. So it's the glamour of the New York City art scene and the glamour of New York City, as well as a very scary plot. Secrets in the Fairy Chimneys takes place at an archaeological dig in Turkey. The wonderful thing about that was I went to Turkey to do the research. I could write it off on my taxes. I am fascinated by archaeological digs. It's on my bucket list. I love ancient civilizations, the romance of Istanbul, and in that book, the science that I include is DNA technology. The Mystery of the Lost Avenger, it's women in World War II. The Lost Avenger takes place in two different times, in 1943, and it also takes place in the present. And so you find out a lot about espionage on Long Island. There's a lot about flying in small planes. All of these things that I love, and the enduring romance of a ghost. There's a romantic ghost involved there. Buccaneers. I'm going to read you the dedication to the Buccaneers, okay? And that'll tell you, or I'll read you a part of it anyway. I was a wee tot of 4 when World War II ended. As young as I was, I still have memories of what it was like in Middle Village, Queens, New York. My dad was an air raid warden, and besides running our small family florist business, he worked a shift at a defense plant called Accurate Brass. When he went out on his air raid warden's round to check the neighborhood for violations, making sure no light showed from someone's home where a blackout shade was carelessly left up, I held my breath. The threat was real since German U-boats were regularly sighted off the coast of Long Island. While my dad was outside, my mom tucked my brother and me under a card table she covered with a thick blanket, providing us with a candle. Fire hazard, you say? This was the time before helmets, seat belts, and car seats. We did all kinds of crazy things. I recall being terrified that my father would not come home. It's hard to imagine the fear we felt when just across the Atlantic Ocean a war was raging. We felt vulnerable, and there were constant reminders all around us. Posters were everywhere. Uncle Sam wants you. Buy war bonds. And the one that's most often repeated today, loose lips sink ships. Just to name a few, the subway was full of them. The war ended on VJ Day, September 2nd, 1945. Mom woke me up from one of her enforced naps, during which I really slept. Firecrackers and shouting could be heard everywhere. There was joy tempered by the sadness of loss in those homes that displayed a gold star. The adults sobered by the tremendous sacrifice of lives. The United States suffered 400,000 casualties. As young as I was, I remember that the war was front and center in everyone's lives. Many a Sunday, I sat on my grandfather's lap as everyone hovered around the radio, listening to Franklin Delano Roosevelt's fireside chats, letting us know how things were going and bolstering our courage. I didn't understand it all, of course, but I did fully comprehend that something scary and important was going on. This was the inspiration for the Buccaneers book, because the Buccaneers book takes place in 1947. And I did that because I wanted to capture a lost time, a very simple time. And I also wanted to capture my Catholic school experiences. So that was the inspiration there. Okay, let's talk about character setting and plot. Characters, when you create a character, the character has to be lovable. Your reader must be engaged with the character. The character can be evil, the character can be good, but the character has to capture your reader. I find that the most interesting characters are vulnerable people, people who have flaws. I can remember, I loved Nancy Drew when I was a kid, but Nancy was perfect. The first time she ever went on a ski slope, she skied a black diamond trail. Oh, come on. All right, that's fine. We all love that at the time. But my Annie Tillery is quite vulnerable. She has her flaws. She makes mistakes. And I think that people can relate to that better than somebody who's perfect. Creating an anti-hero. creating a character that's struggling through the book. These are the kinds of characters that you need to create. You can create funny characters. Your main character has to be somebody that the reader is going to fall in love with. You can have one or two main characters, and all the characters on the site should add interest to the story. They should be able to give different kinds of information or humor. Humor is really nice to add to a book in some way or another. So your characters, just keep trying on like a paper doll. Just keep trying on different clothing on those characters until you find somebody who you really like. Because I really like Annie, and I love her boyfriend, Ty. She's jealous, I know. Okay, plot. Research, research, research. In order to do a good plot, the best thing that you can do is research. You can research the what I like to do is I like to add history into my mysteries. So first of all, for me, the mystery part is easy because I taught forensic science for so many years that I know a lot about that aspect just naturally because I taught it for so long. Then what I do is I research the history of the area, interesting people who lived at the time, and that research gives me a lot of ideas to fill out my plot. What I do when I write a plot is I have a huge Post-it and I make a flow chart. And I put all of the chapters, I put um, a little summary of what's going to happen in those chapters, and then I put where I introduce a clue, how it flows through the different chapters, and how it comes out at the end and helps to solve the crime. It helps me to keep tabs on the clue because sometimes when you write a mystery, everything has to tie up at the end. So you can't introduce something and then just let it fly off into the atmosphere. Or you can't have a conclusion to the plot, to the mystery, where there was no clue that gave you that evidence that enabled you to solve that mystery. So that really helps me. That's just my thing. Setting, okay. Setting can be the most fun. To me, setting is a character. I like to fill out the setting to the extent that you actually feel that it's a character. This is where a writer can really excel as far as using all of those skills you have of describing things, using your five senses to describe an area, whether it be a beautiful area, whether it's a scary area. But everything about setting really should set the stage for the characters to move through the plot. So setting is really very important. The books that I like best are the ones that take place in places that I know and or want to learn about. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of that. That's plot, setting, characters, inspiration. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of publishing. As I said, I'm an indie. However, if you're going to write a book, you really should investigate the three kinds of publishing. You should investigate indie. There are many ways to do this. I mean, you can go directly to Kindle Direct Publishing and just follow the instructions and put your book on Amazon. Or you can look for a company, and this is very important, you can look for a company that will provide you with services. I did all of the anti-tilleries with a company. I didn't go directly to KDP. And the reason why you should do that is because even though it'll cost you a little bit of money to do this, if you need an editor, if you need sources for reviews, and most importantly, if you need a distributor, you go through a company because these companies will put you on the distributor's catalog. What's a distributor? The publisher just publishes the actual book. A distributor enables people like libraries and bookstores to buy the book. They will distribute the book. That's very important. And usually people who are new to writing don't understand that, and it puts them at a disadvantage. There's also small press. Small press is somewhere in between complete indie and a traditional publisher. They will give you some services, okay? And of course, there's the big houses, the big publishers. And What you need to do there is you could go to the library, find a book in, or several books in the genre you're writing, look at the dedication. Oftentimes, what the author will do is they will talk about who their agent was, who their publisher was. All agents have websites, and on the website are submission guidelines. Same thing with publishers. So find out, if you're going to go that route, find out how to submit. Mostly it's submitting digitally online, and the guidelines are very clear. And it's going to take time. You're going to have to do a lot of it, and you're going to have to wait. So I strongly suggest that you investigate that. If you are interested in going directly to trying to get your book into the movies or TV, there's a way to do that as well. But first of all, you have to produce a screen. You have to screenwrite it. You have to produce a script, and yet there's a special way to do that. But also, you can take courses online, and I suggest that there are a lot of companies. Independent Book Publishers Association does webinars and all these kinds of things. There are many companies that will produce webinars that will educate you in all of the aspects of publishing, all of the aspects of distributing, writing a screenplay, and distributing that book. Okay, so you need to investigate illustrators. What makes a person buy a book? A person goes into a bookstore or goes onto Amazon. It's the book cover. That's the first thing that you see. So you want to make an attractive book cover. And I love my illustrator because I asked for something that was different from what was going on in the trade. And when I do fairs, people do come up and they say, do you do your own illustrations? They're really beautiful. Of course I don't. I mean, if I did my own illustrations, they would be stick figures. But anyway, I have a wonderful illustrator and an editor. Don't have your high school English teacher edit your book. Have somebody who is an editor edit your book, because you would be amazed at, what can I say? WordPress doesn't find all of the errors. I find that out the hard way all the time. Marketing, the last few minutes I will talk about marketing. This is what you need. You need a beautiful cover. You need back cover copy that entices the reader to read your story. And you need to have a spine on the book that clearly shows the title and the author of the book. You need to come up with an elevator pitch. An elevator pitch is, you say you're going to a publishing house, you get on the elevator and you notice, oh, there's the publisher that I want to pitch to. She's on the elevator and you have until the 5th floor to tell her about your book. So here I am. Annie Tillery and Ty Egan will capture not only your hearts, but your imagination. You will not be able to stop turning the pages as you follow the clues to solve their latest mystery. Mystery, history, and romance intertwined to sweep you away into that book-reading wonderland. That's pretty schmaltzy. Anyway, you need to have a newsletter, okay? This tells your readers just exactly what's going on in your publishing, writing, and marketing life. Good to have a blog. Write about your writing experiences. You don't have to say, buy my books, buy my books, buy my books. Tell them something interesting about yourself or about your book. Get a website. You could get a website fairly cheaply on something like GoDaddy. Social media, you should be on Facebook, you should be on Twitter, Instagram, whichever ones you can. And the latest one is BookTok, part of TikTok. Do radio and TV. You can come do my show. Okay. Make sure you get book trailers. There are lots of organizations that will provide you with book trailers. Get in touch with the local newspapers. The local newspapers are always looking for things to write about. So tell them, hey, I'm a writer and I have these wonderful books and I'm going to do this book talk over here. So could you please write a little article about me? Libraries, go to your local library and ask if you could do a book talk. Sometimes that's a little difficult. Get in touch with people like your high school English teacher or your college English teacher and see if they can get you into the school to do a book talk. If you're writing, I write young adults, so therefore what happens with me is it's good for me to talk to young people. I've come up with a lecture series. My lecture series is based on my forensic science knowledge, and I do interesting topics in forensic science. That gets me out there, and I can talk about my books a little bit. Best advice. The best advice that I have come across from myself and from all of my authors is don't give up. Work hard. You know your goals. What do you want to achieve out of this? Do you want the bestseller? Do you want a movie? Do you just want to get your story out there? Me, I'm a story writer, storyteller, and I just want to get my story out there. I don't really have great expectations about movies and bestsellers, but I love the writing, I love the stories, and know what you want out of it. And that's going to make for a successful writing career. Thank you very much. And that's it.